Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's Ask an SHR Expert webinar, Working Together, Roles and Responsibilities for Your Most Effective Revenue Management. This is Jason Emanis. I am the head of marketing here at SHR, and I will be your host. I am joined by our good friend, Mr. B, Brandon Berkman, who will be our technical guide, keeping us out of the ditch. Hello, Mr. B.
Hello, and everyone. If you have questions or want to chat in, you can do so via the application that you're on right now. So you can submit your questions, and if you want to chat and let us know that you can hear us all right, you can just type, "Hey, I'm John Smith from so and so," in the chat window right now. Let us know that you can hear us okay.
And we are encouraging questions as we go.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. For those of you who don't already partner with SHR, which stands for Scepter Hospitality Resources, we are the developer of Windsurfer, a robust CRS and booking engine. Additionally, we provide revenue management for hire services for those hotels looking to augment their current staff, and that's who we're going to be speaking with today, is our revenue management for hire staff. SHR keeps thousands of independent hotels competitive in 68 countries. We opened an office in Singapore in 2016 and are now in Barcelona, London, and I believe Switzerland. So enough about us. Let's meet today's revenue management experts. First up, Nicole Adair. Nicole joined SHR in 2015 after working in corporate revenue management for a diverse portfolio of hotels across the mainland United States and Hawaii. And now you're here. I always get sad when I read that. She has extensive experience in directing connectivity and channel interfacing initiatives for multiple CRS, PMS, and channel management platforms. Nicole is a certified revenue management executive, holds a Bachelor of Arts in Russian, and a Master of Science in Hospitality Management. Hello, Nicole, and you're going to say hello in Russian.
Здравствуйте.
There you go. Next, we have Christie Crawford. Christie joined SHR's revenue management team in 2016 with over 2 decades of revenue and property management experience. Her most recent roles include Vice President of Revenue Management for New Orleans-based management company and Market Manager for the Central Region at an OTA. Christie holds a bachelor's degree in finance and is a certified revenue management executive. She previously served as an adjunct professor at the MS Gulf Coast Community College Hotel Resort Management School and president of the HSMAI's Gulf South chapter. Hello, Christie.
Good afternoon.
And last but not certainly least, we have Theresa Stowell. Theresa joined SHR in 2010. Theresa brings 25 years of industry experience in sales, e-commerce, and revenue generation roles, supporting over 60 hotels. Her career began with Atlanta Marriott Marquis. She's held positions such as Vice President for LBA Hospitality in sales, marketing, revenue management, and e-commerce, multiple positions with Marriott International, and also with Concord Hospitality. She graduated with a Bachelor of Business Administration, Hospitality Administration from Georgia State. She received numerous awards during her tenure with Marriott International, including the President's Cup Award and Marriott's 15-year award, Director of Sales of the Year and Sales Team of the Year. Mrs. Stowell is also a certified revenue management executive. Hello, Theresa.
Hello, hello.
Thank you for joining us. So let's get to our agenda real quick. We'll cover the evolving revenue manager, technology, and communication. But before we get started, I want to ask Mr. B to put up a question that will help our experts understand who their audience is. And when I asked these ladies, it's like, what question would you want to ask this audience to help you direct your answers? This was the question. So if those in the audience, let us know, or do you use a revenue management system? And then we'll give you the results. Any guesses? Nicole, what is your guess? Percentage of audience using
exact
revenue?
percentage. I would guess there'd be a decent percentage that says, yes, I'm not sure if we need it, and then also no, but I wish we did.
Yeah, you think that there's probably a lot. Yeah, I wish we did.
Yes.
Yeah.
or no, but I kind of wish we did, but I'm not quite sure if we need it.
Or no, that's the last thing we need? All right. What are we looking at?
These are the results.
All right.
Wow.
Go ahead and read the results.
36% say yes and we're happy with it. 8% say yes, but I'm not sure if we need it. 4% say no, and we're happy that we don't. And 52%, the vast majority say no, but I wish I did.
So we owe Nicole a cigar or
I got it about half right.
Russian vodka or something. Okay. Let's get started. Can you move that window there for me, sir? Today's evolving revenue manager. So revenue management skills and structure have evolved since the last major Cornell study. I don't know if you guys read that. Revenue managers have generally improved their skills. The number of people with appropriate skill levels remains limited though. And there needs to be a baseline skill set and formal certification. Okay, what do revenue, you got what Nicole's waving at me.
Yeah, sorry. So I think Christie and Theresa, we're going to jump in a little bit and kind of talk about their own personal path into RM and what that has traditionally looked like for people growing into that role. Christie, if you want to start us off.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. You know, when I started in the hotel industry, I hate to say 20 years ago, but that's about what it was. They didn't have a revenue management position or role. You had people actually doing or performing the duties, but you didn't have the title. And it was the way it was structured was certainly a lot different back then. You didn't have the OTAs, you didn't have the multiple rate codes. In a lot of the hotels that I dealt with, you really only had maybe a weekend rate, a weekday rate, $99 on weekend, $109 on weekday, and that's about it. But over the years, we've really seen, you know, the revenue management department and just kind of it developing into this analytical collection of data, putting out in the OTAs, putting different rate plans, market segments, just the amount of information that's collected, actually start making smart decisions based off of the information collected. And I think that's kind of where it's moving or evolving, is just becoming data collection, analytical, and making smart decisions based off of the information that's collected.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. Like, I remember the day, so I started in the industry in 1985, and I can remember being a general manager for an extended stay hotel, and we actually used a calendar with different colored dots, and we placed them on the dates on the calendar, and each dot represented a certain rate of the day, if you will, that we would quote. And so we've come such a long way since that time, which is so exciting for our industry. And, you know, one of the things that I think has really helped us is the associations like HSNAI, offering revenue management certification, and the different brands like a Marriott and a Hilton and Choice requiring certifications of their own to make sure that revenue managers truly understand all of the dynamics of the role. And fortunately, you know, when I started in the industry, I started at the front desk. I was a front desk clerk at the Marriott Marquis. And I worked my way up the ranks, and I eventually wanted to become a general manager. Well, fortunately, I had a regional that said, if you want to be a GM, you have to go through sales. And so he made sure that my next positions were in the roles of sales. So I moved out of operations and into sales and became a general manager. And you know, the reason I mention that is because it was really full circle. It enabled me to learn all operations and functions of a hotel, and therefore my revenue management experience, you know, is I think much grander than if I were to simply come up through sales and have a love for numbers. You know, I really understood and understand how the hotel functions day in and day out. So I think the certification piece is really important and just understanding the total box versus the number side, being a lover of numbers.
Great, and I think to those last 2 points with regard to the number of people, essentially having the appropriate skills, and then also building those baseline skill sets. One of the big underlying problems is that it's becoming a more and more analytical field, but at a lot of smaller operations especially, there still is that typical progression with people traditionally rising out of reservations or front desk. And then when you couple that with the fact that revenue management may not pay as well as other potential employment areas in business and finance, means that it can be difficult both to develop and retain people that have the appropriate skill set for the direction that revenue management is going. So I think we'll see improvement as formal degree programs in hospitality, here in Houston at the Hilton School or at Cornell, UNLV, Purdue, et cetera, as they begin to incorporate more and more dedicated time to revenue management. And that will also be encouraged by actively recruiting from these programs directly into revenue management positions in the hospitality field. And then things like internship programs at larger management companies could also help you kind of build that needed baseline and create a pipeline for new talent as your top performers do move upward and onward. But it's also really important to foster a revenue management culture at smaller operations, also as a way to kind of hedge against that turnover in your front desk and in your reservations team. And whether that's using a long-term solution with outsourcing your revenue management, or doing a shorter term kind of consulting and training arrangement that really focuses your team into the correct mindset, even if you don't have a dedicated revenue manager. The management company or owner or GM, whomever is kind of leading the operation, really needs to see to it that their whole team is getting some sort of exposure to the practice.
Okay, that leads us into probably our next polling question. Where were you in 1985?
I was born.
Okay, that's not our polling question. I'm probably going to pay for that. But
You will.
all right. Okay, what do revenue managers do? What do you think, Nicole?
I don't know, how much time do you have?
I think I'll just play with spreadsheets, because when I walk by, all I see is Excel and.
I'm quick. I'm just hiding my browser tabs with my Excel.
Oh, that's what's going on.
If you ask me to outline specific responsibilities of any revenue manager, I know I'd obviously go with the default of rate setting, forecasting, managing channels, but it really does bleed into all of these other areas. I think Christie has quite a few thoughts on systems management.
No, systems management, it really is a big one because, like we talked about before, you pretty much had your front office system, you determined your rates, your biggest decision was what was going to be your walk rate. And now you've got all these different systems that you have to deal with, including, your PMS system, your OTA portals, your extranets, your rate system versus your sales and catering systems. But keeping track of all those and making sure that everything is on the same page really takes up a good part of the revenue management responsibilities now. And that includes kind of taking a step back and conducting system audits periodically. Are you displaying on all of the systems you think you are? Do you have rate parity among all the systems? Are you mapped correctly? Do you have the right codes? Do you have AAA and AARP going to qualified discounts? Or are they going to, AAA to one and AARP to another? It's kind of, each hotel can determine what market segments they want to use, what rate codes they want to use. But the main thing is being consistent so that you can track your data. Accurate data makes smart decisions. So if you have the market segments and you have the rate plans, are you making sure that you're mapped correctly to all the different areas? And then again, things like the opaque channels. Do you have the right rate going? Do you have them as a % off, or do you have them as a fixed rate? Just making sure that everything makes sense and that you're getting your inventory and your rates out to where you actually think that they're going.
Just to piggyback on what Christie said, it's interesting when I reflect on so in our roles, we work with a variety of different types of hotels and brands and independent properties and boutique hotels and just a plethora of systems that we have learned over the course of time. And I think one of the key roles that we play as revenue managers is having the ability to multitask when it comes to looking and running reports from various systems that have to do with demand and supply and the rates and the hurdles and the inventory in the hotels, including the forecasting. And every hotel or every management company ownership group typically has a different way of doing those things. So the knowledge of one property may, impact another that does revenue management differently, or we abstract the data differently. But it all kind of ties together. And the other thing that I think revenue managers do we are the coordinator, if you will, when a certain brand may want to update their selling strategies. And so we have access to so much information, whether, it's from the reservation side to the forecasting to the revenue management yielding component that they may use. We're often pulled into those tasks to compile the data to make sure that the new selling strategies are set up properly.
Hey, Theresa, I know we're getting some comments from the viewers that the audio keeps going in and out. I do apologize for that. Theresa, if you're on a cell phone, would you mind moving to some place where you might have a better signal?
Move to the window.
Oh, sure.
Thank you so much.
All right, well, just to jump back in then to what RMs do, Theresa and Christie really covered those back-end systems, but in many instances, we're the ones setting up rates, determining market needs, et cetera, and we really end up owning the booking engine and the website as well on the front end. How rates and rooms sort, how rate info displays, et cetera, those all impact our ability to convert retail business. So I would actually consider it a best practice for any revenue manager to take monthly stock of their website and booking engine, evaluate how everything looks, flows, et cetera. Do you have up-to-date rate info? Are all the links functioning, et cetera? And that really just kind of falls on our plate as well.
And also, I think we certainly do a lot on the e-commerce side that we haven't done in the past, and that's becoming more and more of an important factor for all of the hotels, especially when you look at maybe an independent hotel who doesn't have the brand.com or the call center or what have you behind them, and these e-commerce is a way to kind of get their name out. A lot of customers who are booking use these online sites as almost now the yellow pages for what hotels are in the area. So you need to be there. You need to be at the top of those sorts. You need to be able to be seen. And then you have, things we certainly as revenue managers do a lot of the OTA promos, the travel ads, those type of advertising, getting the rates out and what have you. When you look at the OTA promo loads, we're inundated with these emails from the online sites about the seasonal campaigns, the holiday campaigns, and those are great. It's a great way to get yourself out in front of these huge customer bases that the OTAs have. The travel ads especially gives you top placement on the site, and you can call, get some information before you decide. Find out what's the return on investment. Can you create specific ads for specific events? If you're going to do a campaign through an OTA promo and the campaign says it has to be 40% off, and you think, wow, that's kind of high, but can you do maybe on a 3+ night or a 4+ night? And then that 40% is looking pretty good. Can you do just weekends or specific room types, that may have a higher price point? So you really have to kind of take every opportunity that's given to you dissect it, analyze whether or not it's a good decision for you, and then, work with your sales team and your GMs to decide what's the best course of action. And then we also get involved more now in creating email campaigns, just making sure that the customer is aware of the product that we have and maybe what specials that are available at the time.
Theresa, you have some thoughts? Final thoughts?
I think that I think Nicole and Christie covered it really well.
Okay, that's
I've
good.
got, I can't think of anything that they haven't said that I would need to add. The relationship with the OTA channel market managers is really important, especially when it comes to packaging and promotions and making sure that you're in sync with what you have running on your own hotel site. That plays a key role in some e-commerce strategies that I have with one of my resort properties, and we rely heavily on it, especially outside of, we have seasonal time periods through the year, so it becomes increasingly important.
Okay. All right. What should revenue managers do?
All right. Well, I'm going to nicely but firmly give a big no to all of these roles as ones that should be combined with revenue management, and instead really emphasize that these are all separate team members with whom the revenue manager should work very closely, especially marketing. And with the explosion of digital marketing in recent years, I would actually argue that if you can't have that as a dedicated position, it really needs to be outsourced to a company that specializes in it versus trying to have an already overloaded property level person taking that on as well. It's just an area that is in such constant flux, and especially with the direct booking wars that we're having lately, I think it's important to get the specialization in that arena for your hotel. So marketing really needs to own the top and middle of the sales funnel, and then revenue management needs to ensure that the appropriate rate is waiting at the bottom of the funnel to both convert the customer and capture as much revenue as possible. So again, I just really emphasize that relationship in those two roles.
I think it's important to remember that at least with the front office team that's in place, the front office manager, the front desk associates, even the general manager probably falls into this comment, is that one of the pluses about having a revenue manager that is a separate member from your typical team positions would be that we're not necessarily in front of the customer day in and day out, whereas the front office team, they actually has rapport with guests, whether they're on the phone or in person, checking in, checking out. They know the customers. The general manager is contacted by customers asking for maybe special circumstances to be made. Well, we're more or less behind the scenes, if you will, as far as the customer goes, and it makes it easier for me, as a revenue manager to advise a hotel team on strategy that may not be what they necessarily want to do, but it makes a good business sense for our overall success and goals. And if someone were in a front office manager position or front desk team member wants to handle the revenue management component for a property, it might save a little bit of money, but in the long run, I don't think it does, because they can be conflicted. And having been in that situation, it's hard to tell a customer that comes to your hotel every week, every month, no, if they want to be upgraded, to a concierge room, yet they're paying a standard rate. And so being the revenue manager kind of allows me to be the bad guy, if you will, and helps them get out of that role, whereas they can just say, well, whatever their spiel is that they give to the guest, we get out of some of those bad habits that maybe were created years ago because of our rapport and our relationship with the customer.
And I think when you look at what should RMs do and you look at the kind of the combined roles, I think you need to also take a step back and look at each individual hotel. Certainly the roles are different if you're looking at an independent hotel and a small independent hotel versus a branded hotel. The branded hotel tends to have more layers. You'll have your GM, your front office manager, what have you. Your independent hotels will have the fewer levels. Maybe the GM is the front office manager and therefore kind of sets the rate and does a lot of the RM as well. When I was with, Expedia Orbitz for 10 years, you never knew, when you call the hotel, sometimes you were dealing directly with the GM, sometimes the revenue manager, the sales manager, the front office manager, and you could see it was just a wide range of, roles that you dealt with people who were responsible for the RM duties that were being performed. I think the biggest thing is no matter who's doing it, you really need to make sure that you've got buy-in from all the different departments and making sure that the revenue manager works with the reservation department and the front desk to make sure that the house is balanced, make sure everyone's trained. Do they know why there's different rate codes? Do they know the importance of the different rate codes? Do they know why they have to track regrets and denials and things like that? So it's really, whoever's doing it, just make sure that the training is done and that everyone understands the point of the revenue management responsibilities.
Very good. All right. We're going to dive into our questions we received during the registration for this webinar. Who should be responsible for monitoring my systems to keep amenities, data, and descriptions relevant and up to date?
All right, well, I hope none of my colleagues, hunt me down and kill me for this one, but your whole team needs to be trained to keep an eye out and just kind of monitor these systems. But your RM really does need to take ownership of this and then address it with the appropriate team member or department. Ultimately, I see us as kind of the owners of the data and reporting, which then necessarily dictates ownership of the systems that those reporting and data are coming out of. So amenities and descriptions sort of fall into systems for me since it's part of your CRS and channel environment, but obviously that would require collaboration with marketing for descriptions, your sales teams potentially for the amenities that you're putting out in your various channels for groups and things like that. So my recommendation would be to have one person own these areas, generally your revenue manager, though, so that your staff has an established touch point for any issues they see, and they're less likely to let it fall through the cracks because they don't know how to escalate it.
Very good. Next question. What is the outlook on the revenue manager role and the integration of more automated decisions and revenue management systems? Theresa, you going to cover that one for us?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think, everybody understands that more systems are being implemented to help us manage rates, inventory, practices in general. And, in my mind, the more business intelligence we have, the better our strategies are going to become. So revenue management, I think, is looked at as, it's an art and it's a science, if you will. And the one component that the revenue manager can add is that personalization. So, for instance, the Hilton properties use Grow. The Marriott properties have One Yield, which has been updated to, the second version. From a system standpoint, they take real-time data. It's factual. It's based on specific booking trends and market information, and it's much smarter. Everything that is compiled into these yielding systems that are automated than a person could ever be, they're much smarter than we are. However, the personal knowledge that we bring as revenue managers about the market, conditions, seasonality, one-time or non-reoccurring events and group situations and just in general overall goals and hot buttons that the owner or the management company may focus on still plays a really huge role. And so, I think that the future for revenue management still includes both. It's going to include the systems, the technology part. We'd be silly not to utilize that when it brings us so much intelligent information, and yet the person in that role is also going to help bridge the communication, the strategies, whether it be to the property or a market manager with a third-party channel. It's still important. So I think we need both. And I like having both. I like the systems part.
Very good. Next question. Is there a daily, weekly, monthly checklist for RMs specifically for Windsurfer? Nicole?
That is a really, really good question. We'll be happy to address this directly with the person who asked as it relates to Windsurfer specifically. But since we have a pretty wide audience today, we're going to do a quick run through of best practices in this area for any revenue manager with any system. And then we're going to pretty this up and send it out to everybody so you can use it as a reference. So looking specifically at your daily activities, you need to be looking at your 1-day and 7-day pickup on a day-by-day basis to identify any peaks and valleys that may require an adjustment in rate or distribution strategy. You need to monitor your rate shop for on a daily basis, generally at least 14 to 30 days, kind of depending on what your average transient booking window is. You need to do a quick scan of system messages to look for things that fail to integrate and assess whether and how that needs to be addressed. So both your reservations and potentially your ARI, which is your availability rates and inventory. If you're getting failure notifications on that, you might need to bring that to the attention of one of your systems account people just to make sure that you're getting your reservations and that any rate changes or statusing changes that you're making are flowing outward to all your channels. And then also do a quick scan of reservations made the day prior to look for any kind of out of the norm rates or just anything that looks funky, so you can take a peek at that specific reservation and make sure that there's not something that you're missing that could potentially blow up down the road if you don't get it addressed.
Yeah, and that's kind of the daily stuff that we look at. There's also a number of reports that I know I look at weekly, and of course everyone looks at different things, but I think in general we're all on about the same page. We review the STAR information for the prior week. For me, the STAR reports come out on Tuesday, so you're just waiting Tuesday afternoon to open that email and go quickly to the RevPAR index to see if it's positive or negative. So you're looking at that to determine if strategy adjustments are necessary. And even though that STAR report is last week, so you can't change or control what happened last week, you're really looking to see, if your occupancy's up but your RevPAR's down, is it rate? Did you leave too much money on the table? Is your rate too low? Did you have an opportunity to maybe push some transient bookings by dropping the rate a little bit? How are you compared to the comp set? Or has their rate increased year over year, but yours decreased? You're just kind of analyzing each part of the STAR data to kind of see for future strategy, am I heading in the right direction? Am I trending in the direction you want to go in? And then I also look at the 90-day forecast. I'm updating and reviewing the 90-day forecast. What's the pickup in pace? Am I looking at, a weekend in April and all of a sudden you're starting to see some bookings? Is my rate too low compared to the comp set? Is there compression in the market? And I need to determine, is my rate strategy where I want it to be? And then weekly, I take a really hard look at the group blocks and the pickup with the sales team, during a yield meeting to kind of look and discuss if there's any need to adjust the wash, any new prospects. What's the current blocks? Are they affecting the rate strategy? There's, 100 rooms in group block, but they haven't turned definite yet. Am I yielding against the 100 rooms, or, is that going to be definite? And then things also in regards to group blocks. Are they maybe putting in a government group? And do I need to kind of close out my government rate in anticipation of a government group coming in? And then keeping track of the comp set patterns, kind of all looking at this as a big whole. And I guess the objective is to really stay ahead of the booking trends so you can price properly, avoid kind of panic selling when it's too late, and just make sure that you're looking at your expected demand, your group bill, and then making any adjustments to strategy you need to make.
And I think, you know, from a monthly standpoint, Christie drilled down really well on a weekly standpoint, but from a monthly look, I think for us, you know, it's easy for us to run reports that have to do with segmentation, rate codes, look for patterns. So it's important to assess the production from the prior month versus same time last year, and determine, you know, what strengths do we have, what weaknesses do we need to implement a change in strategy based on what the segmentation reports. And certainly each hotel marketplace is different. So some segmentation is going to be really important for some hotels and not for others. It also would depend on whether you have an extended stay property or a short-term transient corporate hotel. So that may look a little different even though they're in the same city. Obviously, we want to review our monthly STAR reports, take a look at growth or loss of share from occupancy, ADR, RevPAR. Do we have seasonality months approaching in the future, and make sure that we're set up appropriately to combat those times. And I think this is where forecasting really comes into play, at least for a couple of my properties, to where we want to at least once a month gauge where are we from a forecast to budget standpoint, and take a look at, did we exceed our goal? Did we fall short? Why did we do this, and how can we change it for the future months? Whether you're a seasonal hotel or not, I think at least once a month, we have to take a look at our promotions, packages that we have in place or that we need to have in place. One example might be, you know, a property that I have in Florida is in their season. This is their busiest time of the year, you know, February through the end of spring break, basically. So we're looking now at April, and, you know, what packages, what promotions do we need to put in place now to start selling ahead of that time so that we sell more rooms, shrink the inventory. And then lastly, you know, I guess somebody's got to look at TripAdvisor, and that's one of the things that we do as revenue managers. I know the properties are probably engaged with some type of tool that provides them with their ranking and comments. It's all automated, but you know, I think it's important for us to also have knowledge as to whether the comments are being responded to, what is the ranking, and you know, if the hotel has a ranking that is falling, we should address that and take a look at why, because some of those comments might have to do with prices. Hopefully they don't, but it certainly is tied to a piece of what revenue managers do, and we can certainly impact it if it is. Nicole, you want to talk about anything else on that subject?
I do, just real quick, and this is actually adding a yearly component. I know that wasn't part of the question, but right after everybody's favorite time of the year, budgeting season, is the perfect time to celebrate finishing your budgeting process by auditing all your rate codes in your PMS, in your CRS, making sure that everything that has an end date at the end of that year truly does need to end there, and if not, getting it extended. Taking a quick look at your negotiated rates and your consortia, and you may not have all your rates contracted at that point, but knowing what you're going to move forward with, what you're not, and just keeping active tabs on that to make sure that's all loaded as soon as possible, so it's selling into the next year. And then doing a quick audit to make sure your restrictions that are in place for next year are accurate. either that you don't have them or you don't need them, or that you have your compression dates and holidays and stuff like that properly restricted, already going into that next year.
Okay. Now into the technology portion of our show. According to GBTA Foundation survey on rate loading, more than half of the corporate agencies audit, 36% expect their travelers to report erroneous rates. And others receive reports from TMC, hotel supplier, or hotel solutions provider.
Right, so I think that really just speaks to how difficult it can be to keep your systems clean. And this references back quite a bit to the checklist that we just discussed. And it's just so important that you are continuously doing system checks to keep your data clean and address any discrepancies as quickly as you can. You need to make sure your rate codes are assigned to the proper market codes and maintain that consistency across any reporting areas you might have. So like Christie kind of discussed, one of the roles RMs take on earlier as far as systems management. But you want your reporting to look the same across all your systems, and you want to make sure that it's all mapped properly. And that really is half the battle when it comes to being able to make better decisions, is you can trust your reporting. I prefer personally to have separate rate codes for any offer or channel for this very reason, as well as ease of yielding, but that's kind of a separate topic. So just make sure you're consistent. Don't have, for instance, a specific Expedia advanced purchase rate code, but have it loaded as a promo on top of bar and Priceline. It's gonna make it really cumbersome to get accurate data to see production, which then just makes your decisions a little bit harder in the long run.
I agree with you. Also, just making sure that the staff is aware of kind of what you have out there, that they're not just using one rate code and then overriding the rate to get to the price point that they want to, and just doing the proper training. Are they entering the regrets and denials, but do they know why they're doing it? If you have the buy-in, if they understand the purpose of the tracking and that you're not just creating extra steps for them when they check someone in or check someone out or make a reservation, I think you'll get better information in your system, and then you'll have more accurate data when you go to do the reporting.
Okay. And data is the only thing that needs to be kept clean to make sure that you can make proper decisions. Your restrictions need to be clean as well. You need to make sure that those are being checked regularly against both your highly compressed dates and dates where you aren't seeing much activity. So I cannot tell you how many times I've dug and dug until finally finding some random like room and rate level restrictions that were probably preventing pickup, or a room level minimum stay someone forgot they applied. It's great to get really detailed and granular with your distribution strategy and make those kind of restrictions, but it's imperative that this is monitored. As otherwise, you may end up dropping your rate needlessly when all you really needed to do was lift restrictions. And yeah, don't want to see that happen.
So that was your clean spiel. You just gave us
my spiel about clean
data.
Yeah.
Watch your restrictions.
Okay. How can I increase my revenue sources?
I think that one really kind of depends on what type of hotel you're talking about, and then the bandwidth that the person who's responsible for this has. How many channels can you keep track of? Do you want to do wholesale rates? You have to be careful with those because of the meta search. You have to make sure that whatever channels you put out there, you're in parity. You have inventory issues. Is it extranet? Is it direct connect? So that one, it just depends on how much the hotel wants to take on. But there's a lot of revenue sources out there. You just have to make sure that they're working for you and not against you. And that's just understanding where your rates and inventory are at.
Okay. How do I yield and optimize maximum revenue?
The $1 million question. The single most important thing to focus on to increase your ability to yield and optimize your revenue is your forecast and monitoring your pickup. These are really, really critical pieces. An accurate forecast lets you confidently push rate even if you don't yet have a lot on the books, or maybe your comp set is still holding their rates lower for some reason. A good example is a hotel I worked with it's normally dead in November, but 6 months out, we noticed slight double-digit pickup one weekend, and we noticed it 2 weekends in a row. So we went ahead and cranked our rate way up above the comp set, which probably looked crazy on the shop to everybody else. But it ended up being a sellout weekend in the market, and we got really, really good rate lift. And conversely, if you're watching your pickup and notice that it's facing behind last year and not performing as expected, you may be able to react early with lower rates to steal some share and get base, and then yield back up a bit versus having to panic sell, like Christy had mentioned earlier. So without these two pieces, your forecast and your pickup reporting, you can really easily fall into the trap of basing your strategy off of your rate shop, and then you're essentially just relying on your competitors to drive your strategy.
Okay, very good. Next. How should RM be applied to the opening of a new hotel?
I'll take this one. I think it's really important that if you're opening a new property, you have the key players from your sales side and your revenue management side in place very early. And I know a lot of the brands will hire a director of sales maybe 8 to 12 months prior to the opening date. Part of the revenue management component is, when it comes to a new hotel opening, this is your chance to get everything just the way you want it. Whereas that's not always the case when you're involved in a conversion or coming into a property where there's been a revenue manager in place previously. So you get to start from the very, very beginning, and everything is clean and crisp and hopefully correct. So in my mind, the things that come to mind are establishing the proper room types and room descriptions and names based on the configuration of the property. You start doing a whole lot of competitive market analysis and research and more research and looking at trends and understanding who the players are in the market from a competitive standpoint. And the more conversations that you have between general manager, director of sales, revenue manager, or in the early stages of the opening, the better, because we want a clear understanding of what we're dealing with, so then we can establish the best selling strategy for that property. So I think, all of the things that we've been talking about so far today are involved, obviously, with a new hotel. We just get an opportunity to start fresh. So that's a really exciting thing to do if anybody has the opportunity to open a property as a revenue manager.
Very good. So the communication portion of our agenda. Is your hotel holding regular revenue meetings? How are decisions documented? How are you keeping your revenue management activities transparent? Christy?
Well, just wanted to make sure we stress the importance of the regular meetings, just so you know what's going on at your hotel, what's the strategy. And then, the other question is who should be involved in the revenue meetings? And do you bring in the front office manager, the sales, marketing, what have you? And I think yes for all of the above. Also, make sure that before I have a revenue manager meeting, what I do the night before is I send out the preview deck for the day before, and that way it gives everyone a chance to kind of look at the agenda, but also for the sales department to maybe check, and bring in the group information that they need. Housekeeping, here's our forecast or front office manager, what have you. If you give them the agenda up front, it kind of makes the meeting go a little smoother, so people aren't trying to look up things on their laptop during the meeting. And then also, what we look at during the meeting is your pickup, your pace, your group scrub, and then, of course, just the forecast out. And then what I do is I take notes during the meeting, and then I update that preview file with the notes from the meeting, and then I send it out after. So we're all on the same page. We know what rates are going to be adjusted. We know that what groups are going up and down. We know everyone's to-do lists or information follow-up. And that way it's just smooth. It's all documented, and we have the meeting the same time each week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you know, for me, I always like having more people involved in my weekly strategy meetings. And of course, you know, one way that we keep it crystal clear for everyone is that we use the webinar tool, and that way, if a specific topic comes up and we may want to look at real-time data, I can click over to, you know, that property in their PMS system or central reservation system or whatever it is, a report, and we're all looking at the same screen together. And it saves a whole lot of time and keeps things real in our conversation in our conference. I think it's important that I'm lucky because I have general managers that participate. I have directors of sales, marketing, front office managers, reservation managers, and sometimes our calls can go a little lengthy, but it's great to have the feedback and the input, because I've been in other situations where, as a revenue manager, sometimes I felt like I'm providing all of the conversation, and those on the other end of the phone are just listening, and they would say yes to anything I said. Well, that's no fun. So I love when we have participation and everybody is involved and active, and it just really helps, I think, performance overall at the property when we're all on the same page and we have total buy-in from those people that do take the time to be involved and engaged in the revenue management process and strategy planning.
All right, and I will touch on this last question, which I'm sure is a popular one, which is how do you measure RM value? I think it's a very common approach, but also a bit of a mistake to look at it purely from the standpoint that there's some sort of metric to measure the value of the position. Of course, revenue managers are generally graded and bonus based on performance to budget or star performance, you know, things of that nature. But the real value lies in the reporting, the ability to take your data and interpret it and use it to create actionable suggestions, set strategy for the hotel, work with the other teams and departments in a leadership capacity to foster and grow the focus on revenue management for the whole operation. And so I'll be kind of cheesy and I'll say you can't put a number on an RM's value because it's immeasurable.
Wow.
I know. That was a good one, wasn't it? Thank you.
Yay.
Okay, we got to speed things up, ladies, because we have some questions coming in we want to hit. All right.
I'm just going to blow through all of them, and then I'll toss one to Theresa because it's special for her.
Sure. What policies do you recommend to bridge the gap between RM, DM, and sales?
All right. Well, I guess from a general sense, just a very open door policy. All of these teams need to be working together. You can't have one function without the other. As a best practice, all three stakeholders need to be in your weekly revenue meetings. With regards to any specific policy, I would say a biggie here is definitely having some sort of requirement in place based on group size or hotel occupancy to perform a displacement analysis. That requires sign-off from both your RM and your GM. But that piece right there between RM and sales is very, very important. If you don't currently do group displacement analyses, please reach out. We're happy to work with you guys on that. We have a pretty easy, simple solution. We'd love to work with your team to kind of create buy-in there. But that, to me, is one of the big policies that's important to have in place between RM and sales.
You want to go to the next one?
Yeah, I can just go to our live questions now.
Cool.
So I guess the first one that actually I will kick this one over to Theresa is, how do you handle brand restrictions with OTAs as far as your strategy and what you can load there versus on your website?
Okay. So I prefer to follow the brand guidelines, and it doesn't always work. It doesn't always. It's not always what the property team wants to hear necessarily, because if you're down to budget and you're looking at ways to bring in and generate more room nights, the OTAs, the third-party channels, are definitely a place to do it. But if you've got a brand that demands that parity, you know, is a must. For me, you know, I just prefer not to go that route. and sell on the OTA channels as we do on the website for the hotel. That's just my rule of thumb. There may be situations where a general manager wants to run a package or a promotion on an OTA, and it's not necessarily what the brand wants to do. And I think the best course of action there is just to ask for permission. And maybe an exception can be made, or even better than that. If you're going to run a promotion or a package on an OTA channel, why not run it on your brand website also, and then you still stay in parity?
Right, and I think that's a really important point, and that is not just limited to brand hotels, obviously, but I see that all the time. It's a really easy thing to do, but if you're going to put a promotion on one channel, put them on them all.
Yeah.
I would argue there's really never a reason to not. And you don't ever want for your website to be the more expensive option, ever. So if you're going to have a promotion running on OTA, you need to have it on your site as well. Okay, next question from Cindy. You asked about bed banks undercutting on metasearch. This is my personal thorn in the side right now. I have a huge issue with this at a lot of my destination areas, but unfortunately there's not a great and quick answer to that one. We all know who the partners are that are doing it. And unfortunately, what's happening, for anybody not familiar, is hotels in some markets that are more reliant on traditional wholesale partners and bed banks. We give them a very low net rate. They resell to some kind of mom and pop travel agency. I think sometimes there ends up being 4 or 5 layers of reselling. It ends up on websites like Amoma or Cancelon that operate not in the United States. So they're not being held to any kind of parity, and they also don't care about parity. And then they're bidding for the top spot on metasearch. So you're getting undercut on metasearch by, sometimes $50 to $100. And really, the only thing that you can do at this point is make a test booking, take it to your wholesale partner, and just put the heat on them. And ultimately, it may come down to threatening to pull the agreement, but there's only so much you can do. It's really frustrating for a lot of people right now. So I feel your pain, and I wish I had a better answer. 2 minutes. Okay, Jeremiah asked about overselling strategy. So this kind of goes back to one of the really earlier points about how important your forecast is with your ability to yield and maximize revenue. You've got to be doing a day-by-day forecast, hopefully a pretty accurate one. And then you need to be tracking your no-shows and your same-day cancels. So you have an idea of, on average, how many people no-show. And then you have your forecast, and you use that average no-show then to set your oversell. And to me, really the big roadblock that I run into with setting an oversell strategy is front desk buy-in, and that goes back to the training issue too. Because no one likes to get yelled at when they have to walk a guest, and I understand it's a little easy for us up here in our offices to do that and let the front desk deal with it. But forecasting, looking at your average no-show or same-day cancel, and then just testing the waters and training your front desk on how to handle walks-in if they have to. And and buying them a drink if you get a really mean one. But I think we're out of time.
Are we out of questions?
Oh, yeah.
Top of the hour? Very good.
Yes.
That was well done. I want to thank everybody for joining us, especially our expert guests. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
And you're whispering what to me?
Sorry, I was whispering, yeah. We did have some additional questions, and we will reach out individually and answer those also. I apologize.
Thank you for that. And again, thank you everyone for joining us, and be sure and be on the lookout. We're going to have another one of these valuable webinars in 3-4 weeks, I believe, with Stay in Touch, if I'm not mistaken. So we will see you then. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.